New images have just been released from multiple observatories, and they are forcing scientists to rethink everything we believe we understood about 3i Atlas. I'm looking at these images right now, and I have to say, this does not resemble any comet I've seen in my 40 years of studying astronomy. The structural formations are unusual. The symmetry is unusual. The surface characteristics are unusual. And the scientific community is being extremely cautious about what they're saying publicly. Let me show you exactly what these new images reveal and why some researchers are being exceptionally careful with their interpretations. The highest resolution images come from the Hubble Space Telescope, captured over the past week during optimal viewing conditions. Hubble's angular resolution is about 0.05 arcseconds, which, at 3i Atlas's current distance, provides us with surface detail at roughly 200 meters per pixel. That means we are able to see features roughly the size of several football fields. And what we're seeing is extraordinary. First, let me describe what a typical comet looks like at this level of clarity. Comets are irregular, potato-shaped bodies. Their surfaces are chaotic, random craters, uneven chunks of ice and rock, and asymmetrical formations. Think of Comet 67P/Churyumov-Gerasimenko, which the Rosetta mission studied. That comet looked like a rubber duck. Two lobes fused together, heavily cratered, completely uneven. That is normal. That's what naturally formed objects look like after billions of years of impacts and slow change. 3i Atlas does not look like that. The new images show surface patterns that are too uniform, too symmetrical, too organized. Let me be precise. There's a region on what appears to be the leading hemisphere, the side facing forward along a trajectory, that contains a pattern of rectangular depressions, not random craters. Rectangular depressions, roughly 30 of them, visible in the best resolution images. They appear to be arranged in what looks like a grid layout, with consistent spacing. I've spoken with planetary geologists about natural processes that might create rectangular shapes. Yes, some minerals can fracture along crystalline planes, producing angular forms. Yes, columnar jointing in volcanic rock can create geometric patterns. But those processes occur on small scales, meters, not the 100-meter scale we're observing. And they do not arrange themselves into evenly spaced grids over large surface regions. The pattern we're seeing resembles intentional structural design more than geological coincidence. There is another feature that is extremely puzzling. Near what appears to be the rotational pole, the axis the object spins around, there's a circular depression nearly 800 meters across. It is almost perfectly circular. The rim is raised slightly above the surrounding surface. The interior is flat, not bowl-shaped like an impact crater, and there are no ejector rays around it, which an impact would produce. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a planetary scientist at MIT who has examined the images, told me directly, "I've reviewed thousands of images of asteroids and comets throughout my career. I've never seen a feature quite like this. If you asked me to design a communication dish or a collection aperture, it would look almost exactly like this. I'm not saying that's what it is. I'm saying it appears engineered rather than naturally formed." The surface reflectivity also raises questions. Typical comets are among the darkest objects in the solar system. They reflect only 3 to 5% of sunlight, making them darker than coal. 3i Atlas shows variable reflectivity across its surface. Some regions are dark, which aligns with standard comet composition. But other regions, especially the rectangular depressions and certain linear formations, are significantly brighter, reflecting 15 to 20% of light. This indicates different materials with different reflective properties. Spectroscopic analysis of those brighter regions has revealed something unexpected. The spectral signature does not match water ice, which would be the simplest explanation. It does not match any common minerals we would anticipate. There are absorption patterns that experts cannot definitively classify. The closest matches in spectral databases are to processed metals or ceramics, manufactured materials, not naturally occurring ones. Now, I have to be scientifically responsible here. Saying we cannot identify a spectral signature does not prove artificial origin. It could be an unusual mineral composition that we simply haven't encountered. Space regularly surprises us. But it remains another data point that does not neatly align with the comet explanation. The rotation of 3I Atlas reveals additional odd behavior. The object rotates with a period of 2.4 hours, which is unremarkable by itself. But the rotation is occurring exactly along a principal axis, meaning it spins smoothly without wobble. For an irregularly shaped, naturally formed solid, that is uncommon. Most such objects tumble or exhibit complex rotation, since uneven mass distribution creates torque that leads to wobbling over time. For 3I Atlas to rotate smoothly suggests either it has extremely symmetric mass distribution, which is improbable for a natural body, or it has some internal mechanism stabilizing its rotation. Spacecraft maintain stability using reaction wheels and momentum control systems. Could 3I Atlas possess something similar? That is speculation, but it is the type of speculation that keeps emerging when examining the data. The most notable image, the one being quietly shared among researchers and generating heated debate, shows what seem to be linear features on the surface. These are not cracks or fractures, which would branch irregularly. These are straight lines, some extending over 2 kilometers. In certain regions, they are parallel, forming patterns that resemble a circuit layout or structural reinforcement. I sent this image to 3 different planetary scientists without telling them what object it was. All 3 responded with some variation of, "What spacecraft is this from?" When I told them it was 3I Atlas, there was silence on the line. Finally, one said, "Well, that changes the interpretation." Significantly, they are being cautious not to jump to conclusions publicly, but behind closed doors, the artificial hypothesis is being discussed very seriously. Let me address the question implied by the title. What are scientists hiding? That may be too strong of a phrasing. Scientists are not concealing data. The images are being shared through the normal astronomical channels. But there is definitely caution in how the findings are being interpreted. When something carries this level of potential significance, researchers triple-check their analysis before making any public statements. No one wants to be the individual who announces alien probe and ends up being wrong. But that caution creates a noticeable gap between what scientists are discussing privately and what is being communicated publicly. I've been in enough conversations to know that many researchers studying these images believe there is a meaningful likelihood. I'd estimate around 30 to 40% agreement in informal discussions that 3I Atlas contains artificial components. Yet publicly, the language is much more restrained. Unusual features, requires further study, does not match typical cometary characteristics. Why the caution? There are several reasons. First, extraordinary claims demand extraordinary evidence, and we do not yet have definitive proof. Second, scientific reputations depend on being accurate, and claiming artificial origin prematurely could be career-damaging if proven incorrect. Third, there are broader implications, social, philosophical, and potentially even security-related, which make researchers hesitant to provoke public reaction before the certainty level is stronger. The Chinese spacecraft mission is now 28 days away from intercept. That is the moment everyone is focused on. Once that spacecraft approaches within roughly 200 kilometers, with high-resolution cameras and instruments, we will obtain imagery with resolution down to just a few meters or better. If there are manufactured structures, they will be unmistakable. If it is entirely natural, we will see that clearly as well. 28 days until definitive answers. But these recently released Hubble images are already reshaping the conversation. What was previously considered probably natural but unusual is shifting toward possibly artificial. The features are simply too structured, too symmetrical, too regular to neatly fit natural formation models without requiring multiple special conditions. Let me explain what would decisively confirm artificial origin. First, the detection of manufactured materials, alloys, composites, processed metals that do not form naturally. Second, the presence of obvious functional structures, antennas, solar panels, propulsion mechanisms, mechanical components. Third, evidence of active systems, motion, controlled energy emissions, or responses to external signals. Fourth, the existence of information content, encoded transmissions, structured signals, or responses to our communication attempts. We do not yet have definitive proof of any of these, but we are getting closer. The spectroscopic anomalies might represent process materials. The rectangular depressions and circular formation may be functional structures. The emissions already detected could represent active systems. The radio pulses may contain encoded patterns. Individually, each piece is ambiguous, but together, they are forming a coherent pattern. Trajectory analysis continues to show a slight, consistent acceleration beyond what solar radiation pressure and natural outgassing should produce. The amount is small, fractions of a millimeter per second squared, but is measurable and sustained over weeks and months, resulting in gradual trajectory changes. Natural outgassing can create thrust, but calculations indicate the required gas release will be significantly larger than what we observe. There is a thrust shortfall and more acceleration than the visible gas can account for. Some researchers have proposed unconventional natural explanations. Perhaps 3I Atlas has a unique shape that focuses reflected sunlight to create directional thrust. Perhaps subsurface vents produce thrust without visible outgassing. Perhaps electrical interactions from charged particles are playing a role. All are possible, but each requires specific and unlikely conditions. Meanwhile, the artificial explanation, a spacecraft or propulsion system, accounts for everything much more simply. Thermal data from infrared observations also show anomalies. There are warm regions, hot spots, hotter than they should be based solely on solar heating. The warmest areas are roughly 40 Kelvin above the average surface temperature. That difference is not huge, but it is steady and measurable. What could cause localized heating? Possibly radioactive decay if concentrated uranium or thorium deposits exist, but that would be very unusual. Active internal systems generating waste heat could also cause this. Again, the artificial explanation is simpler than the natural one. I want to address the sociology of what is happening here because it is important. The scientific community is trying to balance competing priorities. There's a commitment to truth. Follow the evidence wherever it leads. There's a commitment to caution. Do not claim more than the data supports. There is the commitment to transparency. Share findings openly. And there is the commitment to responsibility. Consider the consequences of public interpretation. These priorities are currently in tension. Following the evidence honestly means acknowledging the artificial hypothesis is plausible. Caution means not declaring certainty. Transparency means discussing all possibilities. Responsibility means being aware of how society may react if the possibility of an alien probe is stated directly. Different scientists weigh these priorities differently, which leads to variation in public statements. Some are more open in acknowledging the artificial hypothesis. Others are more cautious, emphasizing natural explanations until something else is proven. Both stances are reasonable, but the gap between them creates confusion for the public trying to understand what is happening. My position has remained consistent. Present all the evidence honestly. Acknowledge every viable hypothesis, including artificial origin. Emphasize uncertainties and trust the public to handle complex information with maturity. I believe people deserve transparency about what we are observing and what it might signify. Yes, there is uncertainty. Yes, this situation is unprecedented. But we are capable of processing profound information without panic. The geopolitical dimension adds additional complexity. China will be the first to obtain close-range data. They will determine what is shared and when. Other nations are watching closely, worried about an imbalance of information. High-level diplomatic discussions have already taken place regarding data-sharing procedures. The details remain confidential, but the goal is to avoid a scenario in which one nation holds decisive informational advantage regarding potential first contact. There are also religious and philosophical implications, though these conversations are happening mostly in private. What does it mean for humanity's sense of identity if we are not alone? Some religious traditions have no conflict with the idea of extraterrestrial intelligence. Creation is vast. Life could exist anywhere. Others find the implications more challenging. Philosophers are raising questions about consciousness, intelligence, and the purpose of life within a broader cosmic context. But I want to return to the images because they are what is driving the reevaluation. When you examine them closely, really look at the details, it becomes difficult to maintain the comet explanation without considerable strain. Comets don't have rectangular grid arrangements. They don't have perfectly circular depressions with flat interiors. They don't have kilometer-long straight structures forming geometric patterns. Natural forces create disorder, randomness, and irregular shapes. What we are seeing here is order, symmetry, and geometry. Could there be natural explanations we have not yet considered? Certainly. Space surprises us often. We discover unfamiliar phenomena regularly. Perhaps 3I Atlas represents a new class of object with properties we've never encountered. Perhaps interstellar formation processes produce surface patterns unlike anything formed within our solar system. That is possible. However, when natural explanations require invoking multiple special conditions, while the simpler explanation is that the object is manufactured, at some point the simpler explanation becomes more reasonable. Occam's razor suggests choosing the simpler explanation when both account for the data. At this moment, the artificial hypothesis is becoming simpler than the natural alternatives because the natural explanations require stacking multiple unlikely assumptions. The scientific method is functioning exactly as it should. We observe, propose hypotheses, test them against new data, and revise our understanding. 3I Atlas began with the assumption of being a comet, because statistically, that was the most reasonable expectation. Most interstellar objects would be natural. As observations revealed anomalies, the hypothesis evolved. Now, artificial origin is being seriously considered because it explains the data more effectively than natural models do. This is how discovery works. We begin with assumptions. Data challenges those assumptions, and understanding shifts. Sometimes a revision is small, such as adjusting composition estimates. Other times it is profound, introducing an entirely new category of object. If 3I Atlas is confirmed artificial, that would be one of the most significant scientific revisions in human history. But science is designed to accommodate revisions. That is its strength. 28 days. That is when the Chinese spacecraft will arrive with instruments that can resolve these features definitively. Until then, we continue observing, analyzing, and debating. These new Hubble images are the best achievable from Earth. They reveal features that increasingly appear artificial, but are not yet conclusively so. We need closer examination. What are scientists hiding? Possibly nothing. They may simply be practicing appropriate caution in the face of unprecedented data. But privately, the conversations are more direct than the public statements. In discussions among colleagues, the artificial hypothesis is being acknowledged openly and seriously. Many researchers privately believe there is now greater than a 50% chance that 3I Atlas is at least partly manufactured. But publicly, statements remain restrained until the evidence becomes overwhelming. I believe that level of caution is excessive. The public can handle honest evaluations that include uncertainty. We can say, these features appear artificial. We do not have natural explanations that fit the observations, but we need closer data to confirm. That is honest, that is scientifically responsible, and it treats people as capable thinkers who can process complexity. 3I Atlas may not be a comet. These new images make that increasingly likely. What it actually is remains to be determined conclusively, but the artificial hypothesis is no longer fringe. It is a valid, serious possibility supported by accumulating evidence. And in 28 days, we will very likely know the truth. Until then, look at the images yourself. They are available in astronomical archives. Examine the rectangular patterns. Examine the circular depression. Examine the linear structures. Ask yourself, does this appear naturally formed, or does it appear designed? Your intuition is not proof, but sometimes the mind recognizes patterns before formal analysis confirms them. This is the most exciting moment in astronomy since the discovery of planets orbiting other stars. We may be observing the first confirmed extraterrestrial technology or discovering a new type of natural object with characteristics unlike anything known. Either outcome would be scientifically revolutionary. But I know which explanation the evidence is leaning toward, and I suspect you can see it too, directly in those images. 3I Atlas. Not quite a comet. Possibly a probe. Definitely extraordinary. 28 days until we know for sure.